she knows not what the curse may be. And so she weaveth steadily, and little other care hath she.
The Lady of Shalott is a famous ballad written by poet laureate Alfred Tennyson in 1842. In it, the titular lady spends her days watching the Arthurian capital of Camelot in the reflection of a mirror. She's cursed, you see. From up in her lonely tower, she weaves tapestries of a city she can never gaze directly upon, let alone walk among its people. One day, she defies her curse for an unfiltered glance at her love, Sir Lancelot, thus sealing her fate. She leaves for Camelot on a boat and arrives a corpse. Confession, I've never read this poem. I've never even seen the paintings by John William Waterhouse, which I learned are arguably even more famous. But a few weeks ago, these 3 lines welcomed me into the world of TR-49, a narrative deduction game developed by Inkle. In it, you work a machine full of words that shape the world, and that's about the most Inkle thing ever. You experience an entire alternate history, 100+ years of science and drama exclusively through the screen of this old World War II relic sitting in the basement of a church. It's very influenced by the Lady of Shalott. In fact, TR-49 itself is a game about influence and intertextuality. In this alt-history dystopia, the wealthy have achieved immortality and used their newfound power to tighten their grip on the world. Some way, somehow, that machine, with all of its words, is responsible. In past decades, a family of codebreakers turned archivists fed the machine books, journals, letters, and papers. About what? Well, reality. Malleable reality. Revision theory, using ideas codified into words to reshape reality itself. Among its entries, a man informs you, is a book titled End Piece. It must be deleted to prevent this dystopian future from coming to pass. When I say fed, I mean so literally. This machine eats books. It destroys the physical copies so that the books can exist as data, being read and reread over and over, scanned endlessly for connections and patterns. And that's your job, digging through scraps of information, making logical leaps with the hope of landing somewhere closer to End Piece. The machine uses a simple classification system. Each entry is attached to a 4-character code, 2 letters for the initials of the author, 2 numbers for the year the work was published. One small problem: you don't know any of that information. There's no master list of entries to scroll through, but somehow you're supposed to learn 100-some years of quantum mechanic, sub-revision, DME, proper noun magic. 50 core works have been fed to this machine, alongside dozens of optional readings. Lucky for you, you don't actually have to read them. Each entry only comes with a single blurb. What you're more interested in is the archivist's appended notes. You can click on any linked IDs in those notes and bounce around entries like hyperlink fiction. You can glean names, years, and other context clues to try and deduce an ID or match titles to the corresponding texts. What matters most is each work's place in a 100+ year conversation. Each one is like a jigsaw puzzle piece, given significance through its relationship with the others. It won't be immediately obvious, but as you bounce around and brush past each entry, you develop a sense of each work, absorbing their content as if by osmosis. The almost spiritual experience of diving down the TR-49 rabbit hole highlights what makes the game truly magical. How it captures so elegantly the experience of researching, creating, and finding your bearings along the chain of influence. Oh, there it is.
I think this is it. This one is the book.
This is End Piece. Are you sure?
Alright, thanks for watching. Finding End Piece was rather unceremonious, anticlimactic. It just kind of fell into my lap. Who wrote it? Why did they write it? Why does it have the power that it does? Why would deleting it change anything? How can I process the gravity of my discovery if I don't know anything about it? And that's when TR-49 plays the rest of its cards. According to the writer and scholar Umberto Eco, literary influence looks like this. When it comes to influence, Eco noted that there are three parties involved. A represents the work influencing you, in this case, end piece. B represents you. Finally, X represents culture, the chain of previous influences. When I stumbled into end piece, I assumed I had found the heart of the timeline problem. That's what they lead you to believe. Turns out, end piece can't be destroyed. It always comes back. Why? Because I danced and didn't leave room for X. I failed to recognize that end piece is nothing but the newest link in the chain of previous influences. End piece, with all of its reality-bending powers, will exist so long as its reality-bending precursors continue to create the conditions for its writing. Classic time travel shenanigans. The magical reality-bending pseudoscience of revision theory is really just a manifestation of influence. Your new goal is to follow that chain all the way to the end, finding the work that influenced the work that influenced the work that influenced end piece, and deleting that. The timeline must be straightened out at the root. If I could capture the second half of TR-49 in one word, it would be catharsis. I traced the chain further and further back, finding new entries and reinterpreting ones I'd already found. A lot of those entries I'd previously written off. They felt so antiquated, so far removed from end piece, distant from the drama of the time, the discoveries of the time. But now, having followed that chain back to them, those works take on new meaning. They've been recontextualized as the seminal writings that gave the world end piece. One of Eco's biggest influences, whose name is literally in that essay, was Jorge Luis Borges. He wrote about one of his big influences in his piece, Kafka and His Precursors. In it, he identified a number of works that influenced the writings of Franz Kafka, noting that Kafka's idiosyncrasy is present in each one of these writings to a greater or lesser degree, but if Kafka had not written, we would not perceive it. That is to say, it would not exist. The fact is that each writer creates his precursors. His work modifies our conception of the past, as it will modify the future. End piece has created its own precursors. The moment the player discovers end piece is the moment they stop their unfocused search and start looking down the chain of influences through the lens of end piece. Each work they run into transformed by their intertextual relationship to that book. I couldn't read Silverton or Le Marchand or Pemberton without thinking about end piece and how it's changed this world. And now that I had that foothold, I started to grasp the cascading consequences of certain authors' words and the machine's role in shaping reality. Regardless of which end piece precursor you find and choose to delete, the game will conclude with lines, again, from The Lady of Shalott. If you did your due diligence and deleted the earliest influence, you're rewarded with the closing lines.
The web was woven curiously. The charm is broken utterly. Draw near and fear not. This is I.
Oh, wait a minute. These are, in fact, the closing lines of Alfred Tennyson's The Lady of Shalott, from 1832, the original poem from a decade before. They are the lines of a letter penned by the lady, discovered on her corpse as her boat drifted into Camelot. In the 1842 version, there is no letter. Lancelot finds her body and remarks on her beauty, completing a tragic love story of sorts. This second version was hailed as a marked improvement at the time, with a more thematically consistent and culturally appropriate ending. The original was completely eclipsed. Confession 2. I don't like the new version. It's a post-TR-49 world now, and while I recognize some improvements, I hate specifically how the 1842 version ends, and TR-49 might agree. The lady breaks her chains and escapes her role in the tower only to be trapped in another. a sort of accessory to Lancelot, her struggle validated after he hits her with the Arthurian version of, "No, don't kill yourself, you're so sexy, aha." It emphasizes the tragic romance, which I think is the most boring part of The Lady of Shalott. I found the ending of the original 1832 version focused on the lady dying on her own terms, choosing to embrace the world and reject her status quo to be much more affecting. And I think a big reason why that lens dominated my readings was because I had just played TR-49. In the true ending, the machine sacrifices itself to wipe the concept of revisions from history, thus breaking the loop entirely. The curse is broken. The future is no longer dictated by this screen in a basement and the handful of authors it curated. Humanity is free to influence its own future. And that freedom is accompanied by the final lines written by the lady herself. Of all the works I mentioned in this essay, the only one I had read prior to writing this was Eco's Borges and the Anxiety of Influence, which actually inspired the ending of my Eco essay, the video I created this channel to make. The rest, like The Lady of Shalott, I'd never read before. But once I did, something weird happened. I felt like I had already read it. And that's because I played TR-49. There's something so cathartic about reading something and discovering that it has always been part of your mental heritage, as Eco wrote. It's the beauty of interpreting precursors, as Borges wrote. Because of how TR-49 weaves its influences together and imbues them with its own distinctive voice and vision, the game itself has made its own precursors. I can't read The Lady of Shalott through any other lens. And there's plenty of meat still on the bone in terms of intertextual analysis that I didn't really have time to think more about. There's a lot here about the tension between art and reality. TR-49 also adapts what Tennyson had to say about the status quo for a more modern time, with the machine itself being pretty explicitly LLM coded, regurgitating the same unoriginal junk and keeping the world trapped in this dystopian reality. There are also a host of other influences beyond The Lady of Shalott that you can find inside the computer. Other real books which also helped to influence the game in whatever way, like Treasure Island, which the archivist Beatrice loved enough to name her son after one of its characters. Or The Picture of Dorian Gray, itself inspired by Arubur, which may or may not be the book that corrupted Dorian, similar to how N-Piece doomed the timeline or how Silverton's letter killed everyone who read it. In the credits of the game, under additional writing, you can actually find more names, each providing their own entry to more books. People who in some way were influenced by these books, who then went on to have some kind of influence on the developers that made this game. So many works of art I have a connection to that I haven't read yet. Eco famously had a massive personal library of books. Some say it was 30,000, others claim 50, 30 in Milan, 20 in Urbino. Eco himself gives the number 40,000 in that same essay. It's very likely he hit the big 50000 in the following years prior to his death. Point being, that's a lot of books. In fact, it's more books than one could have read. He dubbed the massive stockpile his anti-library, a personal collection of books he hadn't yet read. No doubt inspired by Borges' The Library of Babel, itself inspired by Kurt Lassowitz's The Universal Library. Anyway, thanks to TR-49, there are so many new works that have been added to my anti-library. And maybe when I finally get around to reading some of them, just like with N-Piece and its influences, Eco and Borges, TR-49 and The Lady of Shalott and itself, I'll again find that those works have always been my influences. Thanks for watching.